Welcome to Conversations from the Edge of Consciousness. I'm your host, Christine Madera. For me, and possibly for you, the inner world of consciousness has always been much more real and way more fun than the so-called real material world. Growing up, I thought I was alone in this, but I'm not. There are a lot of us, and far too many have no one to talk to who shares this experience. I've been lucky to cultivate a community of friends who love to talk about the energies, ideas, and vibrations that are pushing the edges of our own consciousness, as well as our collective consciousness. In Conversations from the Edge, we share our conversations with you. Welcome to Conversations from the Edge. This is your host, Christine Madera, and we are back today with Renée Garcia. And Renée is a lifelong entrepreneur and a reality transurfing instructor. And Renée has used reality transurfing herself to transform failure into success, poverty into abundance, sickness into healing, and a bleak perspective into one that's brimming with hope and joy and magic. Now, through the practical methodology of reality transurfing, she's also discovered fulfillment and true purpose in her life, and also how to connect with the highest version of herself, which is what we're going to talk about today. Now, Renée also empowers her rapidly growing reality transurfing community around the world to do the same as she is. And she does this through her Facebook community, reality TV YouTube channel, and the International Transurfing Institute, which she founded in 2016, that has some great courses on reality transurfing resources on there. So welcome, Renée. It's wonderful to have you back.
Thanks for having me again, Christine. I'm happy to be here. Can't wait for our conversation.
Yeah, me too. So we had our last conversation was on pendulums, and pendulums were really the energies that control us for their own ends. And we're all tapped into them in different ways. But really the idea and the movement forward in transurfing is going from this place where you're interacting with and being controlled by pendulums to really tapping into your own individual self and your highest vibrational self, to really tap into you, like who you truly are, independent of all of these forces that are trying to control you. And that's one thing I really love about reality transurfing and the flow that comes from reality transurfing. So I'm just going to turn it over to you for a moment and see, can you walk us through this kind of transition between what we talked about before, the pendulums, and how we really tap into this deep experience of who we truly are?
It's something that there's a distinct crossover, right? There's at least that has been my experience, and I believe the experience of a lot of people that are in the transurfing community. Moments where they're experiencing something like traumatic going down, or a big loss, or something, some breaking point, right? And realizing some things. This is what happened for me, like kind of waking up and just asking myself, like, why am I here? What has brought me up to this point? Why do I feel as though my life is meaningless? Like my life is meaningless and I don't have any purpose. And am I just destined to like chase that dangling carrot and try to secure, whatever financial gains I can, secure for myself to ensure a comfortable life, down the road? And that really what it's just all about. And I think that sometimes it takes something big happening to sort of stop and take a step back and like reassess the situation. Some people found reality transurfing after a cancer diagnosis, or after a spouse died of 40 years, or a child passing away, or some other big thing, and then finding this knowledge and sort of turning the direction, right? Turning, and I have a visual that I have in my mind that I've extended to a lot of people in the community, that has helped people understand exactly what it is that I'm talking about. And that is this idea that there's two different directions that you can face. You can
Hmm.
face the backward and down direction, or you can face the forward and up direction. And the backward and down direction simply means that your focus lies on what you don't want, what you don't like, what's happening in your life that isn't working for you. Keeping that focus on the stuff that isn't right. And a lot of people live like this. And this is a state that activates us. And we believe that looking at what's wrong and waiting to see that thing somehow shift. When your focus is there, that doesn't happen. And that's why people typically don't evolve, is because they're waiting for something to happen rather than them making the first move, and the focus just remains that backward and down.
Which would make
And
sense of why people would find you after some kind of radical transformation in their life where something does happen. And all of a sudden, they're open to life being, or they're forced to have life be a completely different thing than it had been.
yeah, I mean, what brought me
Hmm.
to the realizations that I've had, and a place where I really stopped myself and I was like, wait a second, is this what you want? Is this the life that you want? Is this the person that you want to be? It was a traumatic event. It was a traumatic event. And I woke up one morning and just thought the whole deal sucked, but I don't know what else to do. And then I started down this path, and very quickly I realized that, and for those of you that listened to the previous podcast on pendulums, when I woke up in this sort of dazed and confused state with a little bit of clarity and lucidity suddenly, that, oh, this isn't me, this isn't my life, there's got to be something more. Well, what can I do? I realized that pendulums had been, ripping me apart for years, keeping my
Hmm.
energy levels low, convincing me of standards that I needed to adhere to get stuff that wasn't even really for me. The time that I obsessed about needing the brand new 5 Series BMW, I look back on that now and I laugh. I didn't need that car.
Yeah.
Not only did I not need that car, the car really didn't bring me any pleasure. It was that the pendulum convinced me that it would, so I did it. And that's
Hmm.
how I gained a lot in my life, right? Is the pendulum convincing me that I needed to be like this or be like that or go after this thing. And
Hmm.
once I just stopped all of that, and I realized that not only was I simply living, by the standards put forth to me by the pendulums, but I was also participating in this downward and backward way of thinking and focusing on what I didn't like and what I didn't want and what wasn't working, on what was wrong with certain people in my life, rather than focusing on all the positive that I had, the good things that I had to work with in my reality, because there were a lot of them, but my
Hmm.
focus was not there. As soon as I sort of detached from this matrix of pendulums, and I turned my direction and my focus towards the higher version of myself, what was working, what is going well, what resources I do have, what I can have, what different options are available to me that are positive. My whole reality just shifted before my eyes. And things started to take on an entirely new shape and meaning, and my thinking and my energy became really, really valuable to me, like a commodity, like a real commodity. And I realized, oh my God, I have this power now. I can
Hmm.
take back my energy. I can, change my thinking. I can, and it wasn't even necessarily that I had to stop with my negative thoughts. All I needed to do was start having more positive thoughts. And all of a sudden, that negative reality just didn't even exist anymore. And it took a little bit of time. And we touched on this briefly before we started the podcast that, these changes aren't instant. I'm 6 years in now. My transurfing, practice is off the hook. It's crazy the things that I encounter and see now, and the opportunities and options that become available to me, and the fact that I don't have to work anymore, but I make money, and the fact that I have everything in my life that I've always wanted, yet it's come to me in an entirely different way than I ever knew was even an option. All this complete renovation of my mind and my reality, it wasn't instant. It's been a number of years in the making, but the journey along the way and understanding how valuable my energy is now and what it can be used for exactly, and all this stuff. I mean, just learning all this stuff in the last 6 years has been mind blowing, to say the least, but it continues. And I heard somebody say once that the majority of people's relationship with time is that they view the time available to them is all behind them. People rarely think about the future of all the future that's to come. It's more about all the time that's been lost or all the years that have passed, right?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it is a fascinating, because I've done that, like, oh my God, where did my 20s go? Oh my God, now my 30s are gone, right? That kind of thinking.
Right. Yeah.
But now at this point in my life, mid 40s, I'm like, I've got more time in front of me, I feel, in being effective than I ever have felt before. And I feel like I could truly embark on any new endeavor right now and be successful with it and create anything that I want, do anything that I want, be anyone I want, and I'm no longer focused on what has been lost, what's already passed, what I didn't do, what all that downward and backward version of thinking, what didn't go right, what all the stuff that I haven't liked. I just don't think about it anymore. Like, I went from a person thinking about stuff that I didn't like to a person that thinks about things that I absolutely love. This shift has produced wild effects in my life, and it really is just a change in perception and perspective. I mean, obviously, you gain a lot of stuff like energy, which then you use to take more action to sort of connect to that higher version of yourself and that higher version of reality. But it all comes naturally. You don't have to try to do anything.
Like for you in reality transurfing, this was something that took about 6 years of work to actually move into this new state. And I do want to, talk about it in terms of a state. So this isn't necessarily something that you do or a set of habits and practices that you do. It's a state that all of these things that you have done and your thought processes and your actions and your focus and the reality transurfing you've done have brought you into this state where, when I was watching one of your videos, which is what precipitated this conversation, this particular conversation, was where you were talking about, and this is my verbiage, not yours, that life is really living you, that you had gone through the steps of reality transurfing to the point that you were in a flow that really allowed life to carry you forward, where it wasn't you doing the work anymore. It was you being carried along by that work. It wasn't you like controlling your life anymore or making those choices so much anymore. It was more about life living itself through you. And that this is a kind of flow. And we talk about flow generally in our society. And first it was about like the athletic flow, that flow that athletes get into, which is just really the zone where really kind of your body is operating at such efficiency that you're actually not using up your resources as you're operating, that you're in this state where you're in such a zone, nothing is distracting you outside of that zone. And so we've taken that idea of flow, and then we've attached it to everything going right. Flow is when everything goes right, which is not always the case, because sometimes flow is when everything gets disrupted and chaotic, and then something else happens that's even better. So it's not a straight line flow, but that whole idea then of flow being this state in which you're no longer really directing the show. You're the show that's being directed through, I guess. It's not really a great way to say it. And I had used the analogy before we started, and maybe this is actually easier for people to understand, that there's this meme that when you're having this state of flow and you're doing all these great things, that you're in the driver's seat and like God is in the passenger seat, or your higher self or something else is in the passenger seat, but you're in the driver's seat. And the way that I understand and have experienced, and you were talking about this particular flow, is really that you're in the passenger seat along for the ride, and this higher version of you is driving the car, like in ways that you never would have imagined if you were driving it yourself.
Yeah, it's one of those sensations that you have to feel it
Mm-hmm.
in order to understand exactly what it is that we're talking about. And I'm certain that most people have felt this, right? At some time or another. Yeah, it's like life's taking you, right? In a
Mm-hmm.
good way, in a good way. Like your life is carrying your higher self to something higher. You're
Mm-hmm.
evolving in some way, but you're not doing anything.
Right.
Your world is doing what I like to say, doing the heavy lifting for you. The problem that most people face is trust. This is where I got horribly hung up when I was younger, because I entered my adulthood with very, very few tools. I didn't go to college. I didn't even graduate from high school. I wasn't cared for as a child in the ways that children need to be cared for in order to
Mm-hmm.
properly develop. I was a rebel. I was anti this and anti that, and I just wasn't well equipped. And I felt as though if I was going to gain something, it was
Mm-hmm.
going to be from my hard work, right? I was going
Right.
to make it happen. I was going to hustle. I was going to jam that square peg into that round hole and make it fit. And I saw some results with that, because that's how the pendulum works, and it likes that, right? So it
It
will it
does.
will it will reward you.
Hard work is a pendulum. I just want to point that out. This whole idea that hard work is how you get what you want is its own pendulum.
Oh, totally. I speak out on hustle and grind culture all the time, because the pendulum loves this thing, right? And in that video that you're referencing,
Mm-hmm.
Let It Take You, I believe was the name of it, I spoke to the fact that it wasn't that I mistrusted my world. It
Mm-hmm.
was that I didn't know that the world was there for me, because maybe I had such a dysfunctional childhood, because I had encountered a lot of abuse and neglect and trauma and all that kind of junk, that to me, my world was not a safe place offering me benefit and easy routes to anything. It was something that I was going to have to fight against if I wanted anything. And it was something that
Mm-hmm.
I was going to have to protect myself from. Since, this traumatic event that sort of cracked it all wide open for me, and I realized some very, very valuable things about who I am and the nature of how my reality and my world works, I've been very fortunate to develop a relationship with my world in a way that, man, my world's really taking care of me. My world is really taking care of me. And what my world wants for me, or that space that I can enter, that
Mm-hmm.
my world has made available to me if I'm ready, willing, and able to walk into it. And the route or the different paths available to me to get to some of those higher life tracks, those higher versions of reality, that higher version of myself, all the
Mm-hmm.
stuff that is there for me in my external world, and the options available to me are way better than anything I could ever think up or consider in my limited mind. I can be a little bit of a nihilist if you've watched some of my videos on the nature of human beings, and like, we blow ourselves up and we think we're these big important people, but we're not, and
Mm-hmm.
our lives are just a blip, in
Mm-hmm.
time. It goes by so
Yeah.
fast, and yeah, we're really quite meaningless in the grand scheme of things. Once I sort of cut myself down to size, right? And I know this
Mm-hmm.
sounds a little bit like contradictory to connecting with your higher self, but once I sort of checked myself and I said, okay, obviously you've placed way too much importance on things that aren't that important or valuable. You've gotten yourself into a lot of very messy situations. You're unhappy. So once I could sort of stop myself and like realize that's the nature of my being, right? If I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to do everything from a place of will or ego or striving or trying to adhere to the standards pendulums have put before me, and I'm frantically trying to keep up, and all the messy things that I can, do as a human being, and just
Mm-hmm.
check all that stuff and back up off myself and back up off my reality, and keep my focus on, again, that forward and up version of reality and what is going right and who I can become and who I will become, and checking all those gross little parts of being a human, and just
Mm-hmm.
like let my world come up to me and show me exactly what it is I need to step into to facilitate some sort of evolution or growth.
Mm-hmm.
It absolutely does show up. It's like a freaking miracle. And when you're in this space of will, ego, striving, adhering to the standards of pendulums, you can't see it. It's like you're blind. It's like you're blind and you cannot see it. Now my world is a pleasant and luxurious place that has so many things to offer me, and so many opportunities, and so many ways for me to connect with my higher self and a higher version of reality. And I don't even have to try anymore. That's the best part. I just let it do it for me.
And so to bring this into reality transurfing verbiage or ideas as I understand them from what you're talking about and from our previous conversations. So in this idea of alternative flow where everything is possible, everything has happened, every alternative is available to you. Well, and then the other thing you talked about was time. So most people think of themselves in time and they measure themselves against time, usually in a negative way. Alternatives flow operates in no time, in my way of viewing it.
Mhm.
And at some point, when you're able to step out of that negative measurement of yourself in time, and you're able to then be in that alternatives flow and trust it as you've learned to trust it, and actually allow yourself to step out of time and allow all of the things that are available to you to begin to come forward and support and flow you through this alternatives flow without getting in the way. Like it's that magical place when you begin to let go of time and begin to actually trust that this alternatives flow has way more available to you than you can ever even imagine, and that you
Totally.
just kind of surrender to it.
Yep.
And you stop micromanaging every little intention, and you stop trying to control outcomes of things and all this parts of reality transurfing that were kind of the steps along the way. And I mean, to me it sounds like you've just kind of like something clicked and you transcended all the steps, and now you're in that state of no time where that alternatives flow is really flowing for you, through you, and as you. for the same thing with me, like things have shifted and I feel the difference. Hard to articulate the difference, but to feel the difference between trying to live your life and then realizing that life is actually much bigger than you can imagine, and that if you let life live you, so much more can happen so much more easily than you've ever been led to believe.
Oh, yeah. I mean, 10 years ago, if somebody
Mm-hmm.
would have told me that I was going to be living the life that I'm living right now, like leading a movement of
Mm-hmm.
people with a modality that has to do with quantum physics and positive thinking and self-development, and living the life that I'm living, having an amazing, supportive, loving, romantic partner, money in the bank. And if anybody would have told me this was the life that was waiting for me, I would have been like, "That's not me." You know, one of the visual of the river with the rocks in the river, especially like we touched on the topic of time, right? So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of time comes into play with trying to make something work, maybe that isn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily working, or trying to continue on with something the way that you've been doing it simply because you've been doing that way for so long. It's hard for human beings to sort of accept defeat and throw their hands up and say, you know what, I haven't been doing things the right way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm open to a new way. This takes an individual that is okay with accepting defeat, which a lot of us are not. And at certain
Mm-hmm.
times in my life, definitely was not interested in accepting defeat and adopting a new way of doing anything, especially if that meant losing a lot of time, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
the perception of
Right.
a lot of lost time.
Yeah, because if you've invested time, like it's time is money. Like, and if you've invested time, if you admit defeat and you've wasted that time, all of a sudden you've lost your investment. It's really kind of crazy how we've correlated time with money. And I think that really messes a lot of people up, because then all of a sudden, if you've spent time doing something, you're right, you have to continue that because that was the investment that you started and you can't let go of that investment.
Same with relationships. I've been married for this many years. I can't let go of it now. All of
Mm-hmm.
that, wasted, all of that gone. It's not wasted and it's not gone. It brought you up to the moment that you are right now.
Yeah.
And, you don't lose anything. It's all gain. But we look at letting go as loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where our perspective is a little bit faulty. And this analogy, this visual of being in a river and there's different rocks throughout the river, and you're caught up holding onto one rock, right? You're clutching
Mm-hmm.
onto one rock, your arms are wrapped around that rock, the rapids are thrashing you about, and you don't want to let go of that rock because you don't know that there are other rocks, or that the rapids are just for a brief period of time and then it's just a really nice pleasant trip down the river on your back,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we hold on to this rock and we're like, oh, but this is my thing, this is my rock, I can't let go, I've been holding on to it for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And people live in this state for years and decades, and then sometimes, if we're lucky, we have the realization that we can let go. Right?
I've used that actually at night. So if anybody is actually, you just don't know how this works for you or what you're supposed to do to let go. One of the things you can do is, as you go to bed at night, imagine yourself in this river holding onto your life the way that it is. And imagine letting go and just floating down the river without any destination. But just, I mean, it's a signal to your life that you're trusting your deeper self, you're trusting life. And to just that practice of letting go, and just do it every night, and you'll begin to see how parts of your life disentangle then, and new things come to you. So even if you have no idea what might be in store for you, just signaling your subconscious, your unconscious and life that you're willing to let go of your rock as part of like a just an ongoing meditation that you have, or an ongoing visualization before you go to sleep at night and when you get up in the morning, just that can help to move you forward.
Oh, totally. And this visual for me
Mm-hmm.
is like I mean, this is part of my daily life. Anytime, like in the pendulums podcast that we did, and I told the story of my mother, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was a rock that I had been clutching to for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it was the relationship with my mom, but at the end of the day, the relationship ended up costing me dearly
Mm-hmm.
energetically, and for the obvious reasons. You don't, how can you
Right.
give up on your mom and all those things that society convinced me were, bad things to do. And finally I just stopped and I was like, but what if I just let go? I
Mm-hmm.
just let go, and I know it
Mm-hmm.
sounds crazy, but I did it, I did it, and I'm doing it. I'm still doing it. It's a process of letting go.
Mm-hmm.
And what has happened since then is it's unbelievable. Like, my self-esteem is shot up. I realized how much of that relationship was toxic, how much it was costing me, how much she had a hold on me in certain ways, and manipulation and all different kinds of things. But on the positive side, I have developed some really meaningful relationships with women in my life, some older women that I look up to as maternal figures to look
Mm-hmm.
up to, that are nourishing and healthy and
Mm-hmm.
beautiful and enlightening. Again, getting back to like what I was speaking of with the time, that people feel that time has all been lost.
Mm-hmm.
Their reference point to time is in the negative. It's the same with letting go. It's, you're thinking about what you're going to lose. You're not necessarily
Right.
thinking about what there is to gain, because you can't see that. But if you
Mm-hmm.
can imagine a river, let's say a beautiful free flowing river, there's lots of sandy little banks that you could, find yourself on laying in the sun, and
Mm-hmm.
great places for swimming and beauty and all sorts of things. Reality is not just that one little part of the river where you're clutching on wildly to a
Right.
rock in fear of what you'll lose if you let go. You know, this is where trust comes in, and
Mm-hmm.
developing trust. And this is where the time comes in, right? So 6 years in, I've now developed a profound trust with my world. I know that if something were to happen, you know, something crazy were to happen, my partner doesn't come back from his business trip, right? Something
Mm-hmm.
happens
Yeah.
and he dies in a car accident or a plane crash or something. The old version of me would be like, "Oh my God, let's
Uh-huh.
let's have anxiety about it," right?
Uh-huh.
Now, and I know this is not the normal way of thinking. Yes, of course, I would be sad, but my God, all the opportunities and options that would open up to me at that point. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
it's really just a different way of looking at reality.
Yeah.
So it's about giving into that. And when you give into that, there are a bunch of other accoutrements, if you will, that come along with that, like connecting with exactly what you need to connect with
Mm-hmm.
to evolve as a person, not just experience different versions of reality or open yourself up to different options or opportunities, but
Mm-hmm.
actual like ways that you can tap into being your higher self, and learning things and doing things, learning how to do things differently and developing your skill set. And all talking on camera, I mean, my God, I had absolute fear of camera. I was notoriously shy. I would never have believed that I could make 600 videos talking about some esoteric knowledge and people would actually want to watch it on YouTube, and YouTube
Mm-hmm.
would pay me. My God, crazy talk, right? That's what giving into the flow has brought me to.
The imagery of the river, I use that for a lot of different things. And one of them is kind of part of that whole higher self metaphor, I guess. because when I imagine floating down the river, so oftentimes, you know, we have these river meditations and it's you floating down this river that's taking you somewhere. But I think that's a really limited view of a river as a metaphor. So you can imagine as well, so you're on this river, the river is beneath you, it's supporting you. There's the whole part of the river that's behind you, that's moving you forward, that's flowing you down this river, because we're very focused on destination in our society. And I think that that gets in the way. And then when I think of the higher self, I actually think of it in terms of the whole picture. So it's the river, it's me as the rider on the river, it's the river bank, it's the river bed. It's the sky above, it's the forest on the side, it's the destination, and it's what behind. It's like the whole container of who you are is in this experience of being a human within this higher self. It's like is how I imagine it with this river, especially when you add some of the more esoteric reality transurfing aspects to it, like the alternatives flow, that is really kind of the higher self or the infinite self, or however you want to talk about it, all of the level of possibility organizing on your behalf. And when you can see yourself as the rider in a boat on a river as part of the whole scene, and not,
Yeah.
you as this writer, in this other stuff that is just around you, because that's just what's around you. But when you're embedded in the entire gestalt of this experience, like, to me, that is where you're tapped into the alternatives flow, but also your higher self. That when you can trust life to that extent, that you know that that larger part of you is organizing everything, the boat,
Yeah.
the river, the flow, the rocks, the trees, the sky, the everything, then the ability to surrender into it, because you realize it's all of you anyway. There's nothing that's not you. And so you can surrender your own experience in that and just become one with the entire experience, rather than being separate from the experiences, which is what we've learned. We're this one person riding the river. We got to watch the rapids. We got to steer. We got to, grab onto this, that we're this doer in the midst of this wild thing that could turn us over at any moment. But when we open up into the idea, the experience, the metaphor, that we're all of that, creating the experience, and that as the rider on the river, you get to choose whether you're fighting the rapids on that river, or you're just flowing and trusting that river to carry you wherever it is that you're supposed to go and enjoy the ride. It's still the same ride. You just get to experience how you experience it, or you get to choose how you experience it within this larger context of what is true, what's reality, or what the alternative flow is, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, it totally makes sense. It totally makes sense to me, and a very advanced way of living. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
advanced way of thinking, and reality transurfing is very much a goal-based modality.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about taking action and moving forward in life, and moving on things that inspire you and all that kind of stuff. And it's very, very, very effective for accomplishing a goal. And I talk a lot about goal accomplishment, but
Mm-hmm.
when people ask me what my goals are, okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, what are your goals? I think people are pretty amazed to hear that I don't have any, you
Me
know?
either. Oh, it's so nice to talk to somebody else like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have any, because I'm not, for me,
Mm-hmm.
having a goal means setting a destination, which
Yeah.
is part of reality transurfing. As the
Mm-hmm.
author says, you set the vector of the flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you continue towards your destination. I don't have a destination.
Right.
Now,
Yes.
I mean, let me say that I don't have an immediate destination.
Mm-hmm.
My destination is that I connect to the highest version of reality that's
Yep.
possible for me. and I
Mm-hmm.
connect to the highest version of myself by whatever means. So if I'm going down the river
Mm-hmm.
and the rapids get crazy and my boat turns over, and
Mm-hmm.
then I get washed up on the shore somewhere, and then I start walking through a field, and then I see a waterfall, and then I don't
Yeah.
care, that
Yeah.
I'm down for that. You know what I'm saying? I'm totally game. And that is because I have given into the flow, and I trust that the flow will deliver to me
Mm-hmm.
exactly what it is that I need to fulfill what my true intentions are, which is just I want to live a nice life and I want to be the highest version of myself.
I'm very similar in that way. And I know we've grown up in a real goal-oriented culture, and every time, I should hedge this a little bit. When there has been a goal or an awareness that rises up within me, that's like, this is something that you really want to do. It's never been something that's been directed by me. It's sort of like, this assignment from my inner self saying, okay, this is the program. I'm like, okay, great, we'll do that. Then I have a goal. But I don't, similar to you, have outcome goals in my life. My goal, for lack of a better term, is really to enjoy the adventure as it unfolds while being in harmony with my highest version of myself at each and every moment. Because in my experience, it's a much more adventurous, interesting, fun, fulfilling life than being very goal oriented. And every time I've had another kind of goal or been told I needed a goal, or I was in a program where I had to write my goal, it's been very anxiety producing because I just don't like that. But that's not how we're taught to live. And as much as, how do I even say this? Some goals are interesting and they're worthy, and it's nice to have a way to move forward. But in my experience, life is living itself through us. And the more time I spend on these planes where I really understand how life is moving itself through us, despite what we think we're doing, like that we may have these ideas of what we're doing in the world, but what we actually are doing in the world is this multidimensional being. And I've had some other podcasts about this. So, look for multidimensional and check those things out if you're listening to this, that it's so much more than what our immediate physical, mental, emotional experience is as human beings. And the more that I've seen how much we operate in this way, that like the energy of life is living itself through us, and it's living itself through our conscious, but it's also living way beyond that. And it's so much richer than what we could ever imagine life could be. That when we let go of the pendulums basically that tell us that we need a goal, what that goal should be, how much money that goal should make us, and why we should have this, and how much our net worth should be when we retire, and all of these things, and begin to like settle into life and let life lead, let life flow through, let life show you what it wants from you, and to respond to that and live that it's a much, much richer life. And I think it's something that we, in this great change that we are in with COVID, with all kinds of other things that are happening and will continue to happen, because the next 3 or 4 years are going to be really interesting, that we're kind of being trained in a way, or invited in a way, to all begin to lean into this way of living, because this old goal oriented hustle culture, making it happen sort of thing is not only destabilizing, but it's not even really working very well, and it's very taxing on your body, and it's on your nervous system, and it doesn't work now because you can't even imagine, or you can't. It's hard to set a goal right now for 2 or 3 years from now and have any idea of what 2 or 3 years from now is going to be. So we really need a different way to begin to live and to trust life and to trust ourselves. And what you're doing and what I'm doing, I think, is one way to do this, to kind of to let go of that outer directed way that we have been taught to live, and to really begin to trust these larger flows within us to move us toward where life wants us to be and trust that ride, because that ride is where you really want to go, but your mind doesn't know it. But it's
Yeah.
where you really, 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 really want to go on the deepest levels of who you are. And so I'm glad you're
Your
doing
mind
that.
doesn't want to let go. Your mind doesn't want to
No.
let go.
And
Yeah.
it doesn't have any idea of what's there because it's all the unknown. And your mind only operates in the known. It can, the known and speculation, but speculation is based on the known. It's not based on the unknown. So you have to surrender that and ride the unknown to get to somewhere that you really want to be, that you have no idea of that, that it's even there, because you won't know it until you're moving through it. And it requires a lot of trust. But that, when I was reading about and listening to the alternative flows, like that's where it took me. That's what I got out of it is, oh, this is what it really means, is to let go and to, trust the flow.
Totally. And it's, again, as you're saying, it's very, very contradictory to what we are programmed to believe is the right way to live. The people in the community, the new, the newcomers, the people that
Mm-hmm.
find this knowledge and they come in and they say, well, what about my mortgage, and what about
Mm-hmm.
my, saving up for my kids' college, and what about, and there's all these hooks sort of keep us hooked into this other modus operandi, um, and that clutching onto the rock, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have a bunch of sort of practices in the transurfing community that we can do to release us from that just in our
Mm-hmm.
minds, so we can see like, that actually would be okay, I think. Like
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't be that bad. So one of mine is, I have been a goal-oriented person. Even though I'm an entrepreneur, I do my best to, save up for my retirement, and I
Mm-hmm.
bought my own home and, do all the things that I'm supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the slides that I run in my mind, which is a visualization of the future, is that I'm in my later years in life and I don't have much. I live
Mm-hmm.
in a little studio apartment somewhere, maybe a town that's a smaller town, but has a lot of maybe rural beauty.
Mm-hmm.
And I live in a little studio apartment. I have my little dog that I love,
Mm-hmm.
my little plants. I've got a nice bed with some, maybe special linens on there. And I've got my little workspace with whatever it is that I'm doing at the time. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy fulfilling my purpose. I don't
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of material possessions because I don't need them.
Mm-hmm.
And I've saved up enough, or I have enough coming in that supports my modest lifestyle. And that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like my quote unquote worst case scenario.
Uh-huh.
But in that life, I have a lot of freedom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't have a big house weighing me
Right.
down, and I don't have a bunch of financial instruments that I've got to be concerned about. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
have, whatever it is that other version of me feels is important, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
free of all those things. And in me running this visualization and living in it for just a brief moment of time and realizing that actually sounds kind of nice. I think I would totally be okay with that. That releases me
Yeah.
from, "God, what if I don't make enough money to pay my mortgage? Well, what if something happens catastrophic again with my partner or my life savings or this or that," right? And and it allows me the opportunity to acknowledge that if I needed to let go of that rock, it
Mm-hmm.
would be okay. That worst
Yeah.
case scenario is actually quite beautiful with a ton of benefits and advantage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not being afraid of losing what it is that you have now. And this is where, when I used to give one-on-one transurfing instruction, I don't really do that anymore. But when I did, I would make people sign waivers, like
Mm-hmm.
release of liability, because I wouldn't want somebody to go, well, I don't need any of this stuff, and then
Uh-huh.
like later regret it. Well, you made me give up all my stuff.
Well, so
This
you're just you're giving up the attachment to your stuff,
You're giving up the
not giving up your
attachment.
stuff. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Now, some people can interpret that the wrong way, and they
Yeah.
actually give up the stuff, right? And and
Right.
and and in the transurfing knowledge, there is also a lot on exactly what we're speaking of. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
Yeah.
That you
Yeah.
can still keep the stuff, but you keep it in a different way, right? Where you're
Right.
not where you're more relishing in what the stuff offers you and how you enjoy it rather than what it's going to take for you to keep it and fear of losing it, which is
Right.
where a lot of people live. So
Mm-hmm.
so in sort of again switching your perspective over and not being focused on the negative aspect of it, you liberate yourself to the point where you can, one, totally enjoy the stuff, and two, if something did come down that alternatives flow that separated from you and the stuff, it would totally be okay. You would be absolutely fine. And again, just running this visualization in your mind a few times, you realize how much importance you have loaded up your stuff with. You're like, oh my God, I really have, and I was a very materialistic person when I lived in Los Angeles. I was the worst, with the cards and the clothes and the
Uh-huh.
shoes and the this and the that. And it's just, ugh.
And I think it too in this visualization, and one of the things that switches when you let go of looking at the things is, and letting go of attachment to the things, is you begin to focus on the experience that you're having rather than the things that you have, because oftentimes we hold on to the things that we have as a way that is like the surrogate for the experience or the meaning of the experience. Well, if I have a big house and I have a big retirement and I have this much money come in, that means that I'll have this much freedom and I'll have this much peace of mind and I'll have this much time to play. But if you switch it from the things meaning that for you, which oftentimes you don't have those experiences anyway because you're focused on the things, if you're focusing on the experience of having spaciousness and fun and an abundant flow of money that has everything that you need, rather than having to have an exact particular amount to make you feel a certain way. And like when you're focused on the experience of life rather than the things in life, then I have found that things flow much more easily and that you can have those experiences immediately without having to cultivate or find or buy or whatever,
Totally.
invest in the things that you think that you need in order to have that experience. Like you can slide into the experience of flow right this moment and
Oh,
everything
yeah.
can be fine, even without the big house or the big car. Even, if you're underwater in your mortgage, if you're in that state of flow, those things will work themselves out in the experience of the flow. And we look to the external factors of what's happening to determine how we feel and the experience of flow, instead of coming into the experience of flow and like running that simulation in your mind about letting go and flowing down the river and enjoying the ride. And then those larger parts of life do organize themselves, not like the next day necessarily, but over time those things work themselves out if you're focused on the experience of having fun, of enjoying your life, of fulfilling your purpose, of allowing life to lead you. And
Oh,
it's just a different way of living.
oh, it is. It absolutely is. I mean, we are programmed to believe that the solutions to our problems lie inside of our minds, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't.
No.
And that's really what you're touching on here. The author of Reality Transurfing says it a lot in the book, that the solutions to our problems are actually found in the flow.
Mm-hmm.
And in letting go, we connect to exactly what it is we need to connect with. to solve the puzzles in our life. And this has been profound for me as an overthinker of magnificent, I mean, I'm one of those people that just would overthink the hell out of everything. For me, this has been unbelievably liberating. Now, when I encounter a quote unquote problem in my life, I just step back and I wait for the solution to flow up to me, because it always does. I don't have to do anything. All the problems of my life get solved on their own accord. I don't have to do anything.
Well, the one thing that you do need to do is to not to ruminate over the problem, and to trust that the solution is the trust that the solution will present itself, because it does. But if you ruminate over the problems, like we started out in the very beginning, if you're just constantly, oh my gosh, how is this going to happen? What do I need to do? Who do I need to call? And you're churning through the emotion of that, then you're blocking the solution that's going to come to you, because it's not going to be what you think it's going to be anyway.
Albert Einstein says that you can't solve a problem in the same state of in the same state where the problem was created. I can't remember exactly what the saying
it's been
is.
Quoted lots of different ways, but that's exactly what it is. If you're the problem that was created in a certain vibrational wavelength and things, and if you stay in that, will never find the solution to the problem, because it's not really in that state. If it was there, you'd have it. But if you let go and you trust life, and you trust this amazing serendipitous way that life can unfold and solve problems for you, then it's magnificent.
And the energy that is freed up, and not trying to constantly find the solution. Oftentimes, the solution's right there. It's staring at us right in the face. And a lot of people don't want to look at it like this, right? Because again, that challenges the ego. Right? The human wants to feel that they need to figure it out, not that it's already been there. And I just wasn't able to see it. That's a very humbling, experience, when you realize, oh man, that was there the whole time. And, I just had to get over myself in order to see that. This is so energetically efficient. We spend so much of our time as human beings creating the problems and then trying to find the solution. And this is pretty much what our time is spent doing.
And that's what the brain does. Like it's a problem solver. So when you're focused on your brain to run your life, everything's a problem that needs to be solved. So it's sort of this self-fulfilling prophecy, where those deeper parts of us don't really see problems. It just sees the flow of life, and it experiences a flow of life, and there's no problem. There's just sometimes the waiting as we move forward through things. But we've been so trained to use our brain to organize our life, and our brain is organized around problem solving. And so everything's a problem that needs to be solved.
Totally.
It's crazy.
It is crazy. It is crazy. And it's one of the big hurdles sort of to get over in your perception, in order to really be able to utilize this knowledge. And I've angered a number of people that have come into the community. Well, I have all these problems and I don't see how this is going to solve this. And I need to find blah, 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 blah. And I'll say, I hate to break it to you, but you don't have any problems.
Yes. Life is so much more simple than what we make it out to be. But we don't, we learn that it's complex. We learn that it's hard. And so we live out that perception over and over and over and over and over again. All right, Renee, we could talk about this for hours, but I want you all to know, if you're intrigued in this and you want to find out more about reality transurfing, go to conversationsfromtheedge.net, look up Renee's links. You can find her Facebook group. You can find the Reality Transurfing International courses and programs. You can find Transurfing TV YouTube link. There's all kinds of stuff there to go deeper with this. It's a large body of work, but it's highly effective. And like we were saying, there's different levels of this, and the more you get into it and the deeper you get with it, the easier everything becomes. So Thank you again, Renée, for playing with me in our conversation today. It's been just a lot of fun talking with you.
Awesome, Christine. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I really enjoyed the conversation as well.
This is your host, Christine Madera. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation from the edge of consciousness. You can find all our conversations at conversationsfromtheedge.net. You'll also find links to schedule a private conversation with me or any of my friends, as well as tools to help you expand your own consciousness and explore what's possible for you outside the boundaries of your current perceptions. Feel free to use this podcast to start your own conversation by sharing it with friends, on social media, in your blog, or even in your own podcast. And as always, live the adventure of pushing your own edge. It's the most amazing adventure there is.